when it comes to this season, the competition on Top Chef this season felt so fierce. And as somebody who's watched every season of it, I was so impressed with that. Do you think that this was maybe as deep and accomplished a group as the series has ever had?
It could very well have been. Especially since once a lot of the chefs that are on the show afterwards, they go on to have pretty big careers, and so not only is it a group of chefs that are pretty accomplished, but they've been at it longer. If you took someone like Brian Malarkey, I mean, first season he probably had 5-6 years experience. Well, 10 years later he has 16 years experience. I mean, there's a big difference.
And it would be the first one to tell you that.
Right, and so the more, right, well, yeah, and so, but the more you like cooking, it's like a muscle. It's like exercise. The more you cook, the better you get. The more experience you have, the better you get, and the more confidence you have. And so no, it's not. This could have been one of the deepest seasons ever. There was probably 6 or 7 people who could have very easily won this. But I think Melissa just killed it. I mean, her food was just spectacular.
Yeah.
I've always said that I thought Paul Key was the strongest chef. I mean, when I say strongest chef for the show, and I think Melissa after this season probably cooked the best food through the entire season.
Wow, that's high praise.
Yeah.
There were so many, really like inventive and thoughtful and smart dishes throughout the season. It was really cool to see. I'm curious if there is one single dish, Tom, that you can remember that was the best for you, or maybe even like the worst for you.
Yeah, you know what? I got to tell you, I don't remember. I don't remember dishes from season to season. Like some of those, if I had to go back and look, also the other, I mean, truth be told, I don't watch the show. I don't watch, so I don't see the edited version. Sometimes I do. If I'm home at when it's airing, and I'm sitting around, I'll click it on, and sometimes I'll live tweet it. This season, I've been, since COVID hit, after the first week of just, going down a rabbit hole and staying up because I couldn't go to sleep, I managed to, I'm up early now and I'm in bed by 9:30 at night. So,
oh man, yeah. Top Chef is past your bedtime, Tom.
It is actually. Last night I was like, I really should stay up for the finale, but I had to wake up at 4 o'clock to go fishing this morning. And so I was like, I can't stay up. I'm miserable tomorrow.
Well, and you already knew who won. I mean, it's like.
Well, I already knew who won, obviously. And so, my wife is calling. I can't talk to her. And so, I already know who won. But Melissa made some spectacular dishes. Gregory made some great dishes. I can't remember them all, but yeah, we had some fantastic food this season. Yeah.
I loved in the finale when you and Padma Gail cooked for the chefs. I found that to be so charming and so nice. And so that's like my dream. I loved how surprised they all were. And it seemed like Melissa sort of got inspiration from what you made for her. I'm wondering maybe A, how you felt about that. And then B, have you ever, and I'm sure over the years, I mean, all the food you've had on the show, have you ever been so inspired by maybe somebody's cooking that you said, oh, I need to do that. I need to put that on one of my menus.
Yeah. So the answer to the last question, all the time. Yeah. There's things that I see and it's like, wow, that's just, and again, when you're at least for me, the way I tend to create, if I see something that I like, I'm not going to take that dish verbatim, but there's little things that they do. And it's like, wow, that's a pretty cool technique. Or I never thought, I mean, something as simple as, I forget what season it was, but somebody roasted radishes. And I thought that was like, this is great. And so, in fact, I garden. I'm looking at my garden right now, and I picked some radishes the other night and made them like that. But yeah. So, in terms of inspiration, I know she already had the pigeon picked, but so when I was cooking, I was in the kitchen cooking. I was back. There was a beautiful old grill and wood burning oven that I used. And at one point, I had someone in culinary sort of just oversee the grilling of it. And those birds are hard to cook. They are so lean. There's no fat at all, and they're really flavorful. And even though they weren't overcooked, they were still tough. And that's just the nature of that bird. It's not like the squabs that we get back here in the States. It's a very different bird. I think it's more like a paloma, which is more of a wild bird. But so I think Melissa, after eating it, approached it differently. I think she cooked it a little differently, and so I think that's where it helped. But that was fun to do. I mean, listen, for me, cooking in Italy using those products it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I also love communal cooking. Some of the best meals I've ever had is when I have friends. In fact, in my book, Think Like a Chef, I talked about the best meal I ever had. It was after a wedding at a friend's house in Maryland. A bunch of us were staying at the house, and it was early fall, and we cleared out the garden, and there was probably about 6 or 7 people cooking, and I was directing people, and we were just opening up the pantries and stuff, and just finding whatever we had. And so it was a great meal. And so I felt the same way. I felt that I was in the kitchen, Padma and Gail, and all just kind of doing a thing, and then I had some other people helping as well. And then the woman who actually took care of the fire was just amazing. And so I like cooking with people. I like I have a little country house out in Long Island, and when I have friends over, and some friends that are chefs, it's just I have a blast cooking with them.
Oh man,
that's fun. It's like to me, it's like I play music, I play guitar too, and sing a little bit. And when you can play with friends, it's like the same thing.
Yeah,
you can riff off each other. You can kind of have that language that you know how to speak, and there's shorthand. And when you're cooking with someone who you know and you trust, it's like there's a little riff going back and forth, and there's also some a little bit of shit talking as well. And so it's all fun. It's all fun.
Of course.
Yeah, that was a blast. It was good. It's interesting. Season 1. It was right before we went up to Sonoma for the finale, and I suggested to production. I said, I didn't know how to this works. I said, listen, how about if I just go shopping and cook for the chefs? They're like, great. So I go shopping, and I bought all this amazing stuff, and I had a bunch of stuff planned out. And I get to the house, and I get a phone call, and they said, you can't do it. I said, why not? They said, legal says you can't do it.
Really?
So I was like, all right. So I left all the food there and said, have fun, guys, and cook yourself. Well, but it's fun. The last couple seasons I've been cooking for the chefs, and that's been a blast.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned season 1. Something just popped into my head. I mean, I've been watching this show since day one. You've obviously been around since day one. When you're filming that first season, could you have ever imagined that you'd still be doing it this long?
No, absolutely not. I was shocked that we had a second season. Yeah. And it was such a small production then too. We had about 40 people on the team. Wow. In fact, our executive producer, Donine, she was a PA on the first season. Now she's our executive producer.
Wow.
No, I thought maybe some family members would watch it, and I thought maybe some industry people would watch it and make fun of us, and this is the worst thing ever, worst decision I ever had in my life. And that was my goal in season 1. I said, if I can get the industry to respect what we're doing, then we're okay. And I think it was season 3 when I started getting phone calls from chefs like Danielle Boulud saying, how could I be a judge? And I was I think we're there. We're good.
There. Yeah. Totally. So Tom, I know you've been staying really busy in quarantine. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast here. What was the creative process there? What's that been like for you?
Yeah, so we actually started that podcast. It's interesting. It goes back because I was a couple years back, a little more than 4 years ago. I was a correspondent, the first food correspondent for MSNBC. And I co-founded an organization called Food Policy Action. So I was, focused on a lot of food policy. And so that's what we were working on. And I pitched the show. And after the last presidential election, they decided that food was just not going to be talked about. And so, they let me go after 2 seasons. And so I had this idea for the show, and I actually pitched it around. And, depending on who we were pitching it to, we kind of changed a little bit and maybe threw in some gimmicks to make it just more kind of fun and watchable. And it didn't sell. And then, I started listening to podcasts, and some of them I liked. And then my wife is a co-founder of an organization that she co-founded after a film. She made a film called A Place to Table. It's about hunger in America. And so we started a charitable 501c3 called A Place to Table. And her and her partner there, Kristen Castry, they kind of pushed me into it and helped shape it as well. And and then kind of we sold it to iHeartRadio. And so we started doing it actually I started recording right after the first of the year, pre-COVID, and just started to do interviews. We had a basic outline of the 12 different episodes that we wanted to present, and we started doing some interviews, and then COVID hit. And so that kicked us out of the studio. So now I do everything inside a closet. It's my new recording studio. And they give me portable recording devices and stuff, and we're doing everything via some of the interviews via, it's called Squadcast. It's like Zoom, but it's called Squadcast. And because we were focusing on food through the news of the day, so we were looking at immigration, which is topical, and how it affects food, and we were looking at slavery. There's actually slavery happening right now in the high seas, and tuna that you eat could be caught on a slave ship, and so we were looking at that. We were looking at other issues around concentration in the food system. You're seeing a lot of these meat plants, the meat processors that got hit with COVID, had to shut down, and looking at whether or not there's just these processors have become monopolies, and whether or not they should be broken up. And so, looking at subjects like that. And so, so we were looking at food through the news of the day, but then COVID became the news of the day, and you couldn't really get away from it. And so we have a unique system now where we're literally doing everything, maybe 10 days before it airs. So we're doing the interviews, things get edited like the week of for the next week. So it's really topical, and it's been a great process. And I'm fortunate to have an amazing producer, Gabrielle Collins, who's just great. And there's all kinds of stuff happening outside my window right now. My air conditioner broke. Someone's fixing it, which is great.
Oh, hey, no, I love that. I'm along.
So it's been a great process, and I'm enjoying it. Years ago, I did an interview show that was on a boat. It was a fishing show, but it was an interview show on a boat. It was on YouTube. It's called Hooked Up with Tom Colicchio. Check it out. It's funny. So I always wanted to, I kind of like doing interviews. And so this was a way to do both. And let's see, the second episode just dropped, and it's on feeding people in a crisis. And we actually, it's a two-part episode, because we actually started talking to World Central Kitchen. Nate Mook, who's the CEO of World Central Kitchen. It's Jose Andres' organization. Yeah. And so it was really about feeding people in a disaster zone, whether it's a hurricane or fires and earthquakes and things that they've been doing. And then pandemic hit, and he's also feeding people. So it was really just kind of looking at the difference between the two. And I think what COVID did is really shone a spotlight on the issues with feeding people in the disaster zone, and how things like FEMA just takes too long to ramp up, and how money goes to feeding people, but it actually, there's an easier way to do it. There's working through restaurants. And so if you think about, right now, just read about these lines, people are waiting 3 hours, 4 hours to get, to a food pantry. Well, if the federal government just actually took money and put it through restaurants, restaurants can produce food that people need. And so you alleviate that bottleneck, you spread it out. And so, the way Jose Andres works is that he actually works through existing restaurants. He gives the restaurants a grant, so it's like, $10 a meal, and they have to produce meals. Well, they may have to produce 5,000 meals a week. Well, you can spread that out. Each restaurant could do, a couple hundred meals, a night, maybe 1,000 meals a week. And you spread out that bottleneck. You can actually, because it's many restaurants are involved, you can have food that's more, culturally appropriate, or places that have dietary restrictions. So you can deal with vegans or vegetarians or halal or kosher. And so I think that, Jose was focused on this for a long time, but I think it wasn't getting traction because, typically a disaster happens and within a few months things get back to normal. But I think the current situation we're in right now really shows a need for a better plan than our current plan.
Yeah, well, it's obviously such an insane time for the world and such an insane time for the food industry, and you're such a great guy to be talking about that. I mean, to take it to a little more personal, micro level, I know that you've had to do things with your businesses. I know Craft in New York has just done some new stuff in the past week, if I'm correct. What has that process been like for you with your restaurants?
Well, we laid off on March 14th or 13th. We laid off, March 13th, we laid off over 400 people, shut all the restaurants. And, for me, I contemplated doing some community feeding, and I contemplated doing a few other things, but I really felt that it was important for my staff to stay home. School was out, so people who worked for me who had children, didn't have daycare. In New York City, people have to take public transportation, and I have friends of mine that work in ERs with doctors, and they were saying, people just need to stay home. That's my new puppy. Sorry.
Okay.
They were describing the ERs as just absolute battle zones, and so I thought it was best to keep my people at home, and unemployment was, the federal government stepped in and did the numbers were pretty good, and so but recently I decided to open. Things in New York are starting to get better now and to open, but I kind of reimagined our restaurant as a kind of grocery store, butcher shop, and also a meal kit. So what we do is have things like, for instance, we'll brine a chicken for you. We'll tie it so it's ready to roast. Take some vegetables, marinate them in olive oil and some herbs, and so you'll get the chicken, you'll get the vegetables with directions where you just put the vegetables in a roasting pan, put the chicken on top, put it in a 350-degree oven for 50 minutes, and done, and slice and serve. So things like that, where think of like Blue Apron, but for families.
Okay.
For like 2 people or 4 people, as opposed to the small plated food. So we're doing that, and then we're going to turn it into a butcher shop and sort of grocery store, small grocery store. That's the best we could do. I think Monday, I believe New York is going to phase 2, so you could do outdoor dining. We have some seats in the front of our restaurant. We may just do some bar snacks and serve cocktails and see how that goes. And we have no idea, but it's tough right now. Restaurants, even opening restaurants, it's not a matter of getting open, because getting open where you have to remove half your seats, you're losing money. So you open, you lose money. You close, you lose money. In fact, in most cases, if you close, you lose less money. The work that I've been doing with the Independent Restaurant Coalition, it's an organization that formed, in mid-March, and we have been lobbying Congress to, with a specific request to focus on the restaurant industry. It's one of the hardest hit industries because we were forced to close, also because we have to open into social distancing, probably into pretty far into the future until there's a vaccine. And so we had some good news this week. We actually had a bill that supports restaurants drop both in the House and the Senate. There's bipartisan support, so we think we have a shot if we can get this through, and it'll be part of a larger stimulus package.
Sure.
So listen, we employ 11 million people, independent restaurants. If you think about farmers and fishermen and winemakers and cheesemakers and everyone else, all those ancillary businesses that we rely on to do what we do in our restaurants, it's probably close to 20 million people. It's we add $1 trillion to the economy, plus 90 to 95% of every dollar that we take in a restaurant goes out the door, and our margins are slim. And so if you really want to stimulate the economy, you need to actually put it through businesses where money goes out the door. You don't buy your stock back, and you don't give bonuses to execs. And so we think that the restaurant industry is uniquely positioned to do that. And also, the economy aside, we're pillars of our communities. Small independent restaurants are often owned by recent immigrants, but they're also community centers. And I would say restaurants and chefs are first responders. If someone's raising money for a school, if someone's raising money for hunger or cancer or whatever it is, chefs are there, because those events usually have food and feature food. And so, one particular group two that I'll mention, one that I'm associated with called Children of Bellevue. It's a group that acts as advocates for the children that are in Bellevue Hospital, and they create programs. I've been on the board for almost 26 years now.
Wow.
We do an event every year. 20, 25 chefs show up, dish out great food. and we raised, $500,000 for our charity. There's another one called Alex's Lemonade Stand that literally started with a child who had cancer, who decided that she was going to raise money through a lemonade stand to help other children who were sick. And she died, and her parents kept it going, and it turned into a huge event. Started in Philadelphia with Chef Mark Vetri, started as a block in his restaurant, then turned into a block party, then ended up to be a much larger event. And also now there's an event that happens in Los Angeles as well. And so these are chefs that are doing this work. And so besides an economic argument, I'll make an argument that chefs are really there to support the community, and we need help to get through this.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Totally. Well, we love our chefs. It sounds like you have certainly been staying busy, and we so appreciate all the work you've been doing. Thank you so much again, Tom, for taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks.
And we wish you all the best in all your projects. Thank you very much.
Good luck with the podcast. We'll be listening.
Thank you. Thanks.